Welcome to From Potential to Powerhouse, Success Secrets from Female Leaders, where female trailblazers share their journeys and the aha moments that made all the difference. With your host, serial entrepreneur and trailblazer herself, Tracy Holland.
I'm so excited to have you here, Coach Keren Eldad, the woman who has changed my 2020 for the better on a whole host of levels. So pleased to have an opportunity to talk to you today about one of the things that you and I spend a lot of time talking about in general. So let's kick off. I would love to just have you give everyone a couple of seconds and minutes about just who you are and a little bit about yourself, just for the benefit of our listeners and the people coming in and hearing a little bit about. They're going to hear from me about you, but I'd love you to share a little bit about you too.
Sure. First, I want to say thank you so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure to have any kind of conversation with you. You're a very, very special person, and it's a joy to watch you pass the work forward. It is not only the highest compliment for me, it's the biggest joy to see others fill others with joy. That's what compassion is all about. Mm-hmm. So this is a really, really beautiful moment. It makes my heart sing. I just wanted you to know that.
It makes my heart sing too.
My name is Keren Eldad. I have been a personal and executive coach for several years now and a high-level suicide counselor with Crisis Text Line. I came to this work after the collapse of my own life and the climb back into who I really am. And it's a real joy to get to practice this, but importantly, to get to teach people this. Mindfulness, mindset, support. This is a learnable skill. There is actually nothing that serious going on, but you can master it. And when you master this, you reach new realms of performance. And that's what I'm all about.
I think what's so special. So let's for a minute or two, let's talk about our first conversation. So I remember reaching out to you through a mutual, I think, former client of yours or a mutual friend. And I was in a really tough place. I was really in a transitional place. You know, from the outside, I felt like the world saw me as successful, and I thought I was successful, but I didn't feel successful on the inside. And I think the thing that I found when I reached out to you was that every time I continued to push myself to the next level and feel like I needed to hit something new and a new goal and a new aspiration, it just came from this place of feeling depleted, like I had no gas left in my gas tank. And every time I would reach a new success measure that I had put onto my list of to-dos to say, once I get to here, then I'm going to feel fulfilled. Once I do this, I'm going to feel good. Once I get here, I'm going to feel satisfied or safe or whatever it may be. I would hit those marks, and I would feel exactly the same way I felt the day before I got there.
You were on a hamster wheel. You were in the rat race. But you're forgetting something pretty critical about that first meeting, which I remember like it was yesterday, as a matter of fact. You were in New York. You were calling from the street. You were getting in a car, out of a car. It was classic Tracy. And I know that what you're saying right now is resonating with absolutely every single person out there who is listening. What you're talking about right now is the paradox of being a superstar, the paradox of not actually having a North Star, not having a support system, not having a real understanding of what this is all about, and just constantly churning towards some bottom line or some target that's always going to move. And your expectations, therefore, are always outpacing your desires, which leaves you somehow chasing, and feeling empty, coming up empty every single time. What was really wonderful that you're forgetting about that particular conversation was that in that very same first talk, you told me about a time in your 20s where you somehow wandered by mistake into some law of attraction type class. And in those moments, instantly reverberated with it. You felt it. You knew it. You knew what you knew. But then you still went back to doing things, you know, the safe way. But you remembered that there was another way, and you were coming back to see if you could remember that again. And
right.
That's what you found.
Right.
That's where that recognition came from. I didn't appear magically at some random point and teach you something. I reminded you of something. It was always there.
So true. And, you know, interestingly, when I was referred to you by someone who is very high achieving, an unbelievable dynamo female success powerhouse. And she said that you had a very unique approach to working with superstar achievers. And I remember when we had the conversation, I think what I was seeking when I called you was an accountability partner to help me figure out how to feel fulfilled and satisfied and feel like I actually could enjoy each of these achievements and have somebody hold me accountable for the enjoyment piece as well as the achievement piece. And I think what's so interesting and what I would love to talk about today is what I've learned in 2020 and what I've practiced with you and what I keep being reminded of is a whole different way of thinking about motivation and achievement and an output of energy in order to achieve a goal. And where is that coming from? Yeah. And where is the enjoyment and the joy in the moment versus getting to the place where you think you want to be in order to feel joyful? And it's like, I'm going to sacrifice everything and I'm going to just grin and bear it. And I'm going to wake up every day and burn rubber. And then at some point when I get to the place that I think I want to be, I'm going to be happy.
You're solving for the wrong thing. I interrupted you before. I said, do you remember what I said when you said I'm looking for an accountability partner? And I kind of laughed and said, you're going to get a lot more than that. And the reason is most overachievers come to coaching because they want to achieve more, which is very, very charming. And what you end up acquiring is not just an accountability partner, but something way bigger than that, which is the ability to do it for yourself. This is what procedural learning is about. I'm not giving you an intellectual understanding of things, and I'm not giving you my personal knowledge that you will then rely on. This isn't about memory or facts. This is about a practice that you start to perform automatically at every turn, which completely shifts the way you create. It shifts your outcomes. It turns your outcomes into completely different outcomes. To make it very focused, what's happening with the natural overachiever, like you, like everybody out there who's listening, is you're like a racehorse. You've got blinders on, you're looking down, let's go, let's do this, let's go. Well, what's the problem with blinders? You can't see around. Your peripheral vision is massively blocked. You are actually, believe it or not, even though it's counterintuitive, you're naturally very limited. When you take those blinders off, when you're willing to chill out and look up, you will see infinitely greater possibilities. And this gets to the heart of the matter of our talk today. The flipping of the premise is very, very simple to explain. The intense personalities are operating from is a flawed premise. And that is that the world is filled with resources, but they're finite. Right. And those finite resources are something that I need to accumulate because I am a superstar and it is my birthright to do so, which means I got to get more resources than you have. If you have a husband, I want your husband, or I want a husband because it means less husbands for me. Or if you have money, then somehow I have less money because you having money somehow impacts me. It's a very, very scarcity take on the world. And this is where we start to use force instead of power. Brene Brown calls these 4 different kinds of power. I just go to simplify it a little bit. There's actually one that isn't power. It is force. When she talks about power to or power over, what I'm claiming is that is not power at all. That is force.
Right.
When you try to exercise power over another person, you are automatically exerting a lot of energy. That energy is finite. It comes from lack. It comes from a severe fear that the other needs to be suppressed because they're somehow interfering with your ability to create and to have and to be. Right. But if you flip the premise and believe in abundance, instead of scarcity. Believe that there are infinite resources on this planet. For example, when I was a little kid, there was no internet. And look at this. I am having a conversation in real time with a friend 3,000 miles away. Out of nowhere, this has happened in my lifetime. That to me is a sign that we are infinitely expansive in this world. So I'm not competing with you for anything. And
Exactly.
this gives me the ability to not only have power within, to know that I'm not asking anyone for anything that isn't already there, but to also have power with, to collaborate with you, to walk arm in arm with real strength, with real effect, and not force anything around me.
Right.
This is the beginning of the flipping of the premise, because when you're fighting for achievements, when you're going after dangling shiny object after shiny object, you're only using force, and of course you're going to come up short.
So let's talk about what the experience of feeling force feels like, because I can certainly describe it for myself.
What did it feel like for you?
And I think a lot of people could probably identify with what I call the symptoms of force, okay? The symptoms of force being establishing a there that feels better than here.
Yes.
An expectation.
Unmet expectations, yes.
Right? So an expectation of there feels better than here. And
yes,
once I'm there, I'm going to feel A, B, C, D.
Which is true, but let's talk about the in the moment feeling. The in the moment of feeling, if it's there and I don't have it right now, you're feeling lack. You're feeling shortage. You're feeling anxious. You're not satisfied where you are. It's
right.
Dissatisfaction that you're feeling. Yes.
Right. And so I would say the symptoms of dissatisfaction include sleeplessness,
yes.
agitation,
yes.
irritability,
yes.
weepiness, maybe depression.
Sometimes. Definitely anxiety.
Anxiety, overeat, which leads to overeating, right?
Yes.
Could lead to overdrinking, could lead to overwatching TV, it can lead to, right?
All numbing or all overcompensating behaviors. In fact, one of the easiest way to spot an overachiever is people pleasing. The boundaries are very, very low because you're constantly trying to compensate and to hustle your way through life. So I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone. I'm not looking at your listeners right now, but I can tell you that if I were listening to this, I would recognize it in myself pretty readily. You always know when you're overcompensating. You always know when you're coming from force. And the reason is you end up feeling empty. You end up feeling very uncomfortable. It just doesn't feel like a good exchange. You feel guilt. You feel shame. You feel like you're not measuring up. You feel like no matter what you do, you're not measuring up. It's never enough. It's a bottomless pit. Your relationships aren't particularly satisfying. These are the effects. Now, what's the problem? The problem, Tracy, is not that people don't identify these feelings. Believe me, people out there know how they feel. I always say the issue isn't pointing out where your unhappiness is. The problem is your ability to be courageous enough to admit it.
Right. Bingo. But I think there's a point in time in which you may not even know what you know. You just feel it, right? You haven't identified where it's coming from. And you don't necessarily connect the dots.
All you got to know is that this sucks. That's it. This morning I spoke with a very, very nice person who has been circling coaching for a long time. This is a natural behavior of invulnerable superstars. I coach, world-class leaders, and they're not very likely to admit that they need help. That's the first obstacle. So he's been speaking to me here and there and everywhere. And today he finally said, I just want to say 2020 sucked. And I said, good. It's a good moment. Finally. How nice. You have two ways about this. If you're reluctant to making a change that will change your life, the first option is trauma. That's what happened to me. I lost everything, man, everything. And I ended up in a place where I had to look up and say to someone, will you please help me? And the second option is to really just get sick of your excuses about why your life isn't enough and doesn't feel that good. And just open up and say, you know what? I could use a little help around here.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, in both instances, you will find a stretched out hand ready to help you.
Awesome. And honestly, I think, the beauty of anyone who feels this way is to know that there is, first, I would say, identifying how the feeling feels and understanding what's going on, right? It's like having a stomach ache and then all of a sudden realizing you're lactose intolerant. There is a cause and effect, right? So
Sure.
finding the stomach ache and saying, ugh, my stomach feels terrible. And it's that feeling of whatever those symptoms are for you. The anxiety being a subset of the expectation not being met of when I get here, then I'll be happier.
Yeah.
Then understanding what is underneath that, identifying the feeling. And then my quest with you this past year, and what I think has been the most cracking open experience of my own life, is now that I understand that, now what?
Yeah. Now what? Well, now what is really the best question, because you can start to actually shift gears and start to really put yourself to the task of infinite deliberate creation. And that's where we are right now, you and I, in this journey. It's wonderful. You're here to produce music. You're here to sustain and to really learn how to not only give a blow, but take a blow. That's a completely different modus operandi. Also, the things that you will create, you are actually creating deliberately, meaning you are conscious about why you want them. What's really happening when we start this transition is, the reason it's so painful is you actually do have to reach a level of admission that the systems you did choose, even though they look real good on Instagram, are not actually something you're very comfortable with. It was a be careful what you wish for kind of situation that can only be seen in hindsight. So the business partner that looked so good on paper is a complete douche. Why did I choose somebody like this? The business partner, the lover, the material things, I like to tell my story because it's mine, and I have no problem sharing with it with confidentiality and all. And it is simple. I was 35 years old when this began for me. I woke up every day in the house of my dreams with the perfect dining room and library and fireplace and all the things I've ever wanted. I was married to a tall man with no chest hair. This was very, very important to me at the time.
And a beautiful head of hair.
And a gorgeous head of hair. And he spoke several languages, which was also something that was very important to me at the time. And I had a C-level job. And I hated every part of it, man. I was sleeping in the library. That library I loved so much because I couldn't stand him. He was abusive and awful. I didn't like my job. I knew it was a good job. I was happy to have such a good job. Everybody wanted that kind of job, except for me.
Right.
And the friendships that I had too were wonderful, but so freaking competitive that sometimes I found myself asking, why am I trying to hang out with these people?
Right.
When you start asking questions like that, you start getting a little closer to who you really are. And if you're brave enough to actually act on it, you will create a universe that is so far beyond anything you've ever imagined. It's heaven right here on earth.
Right. So in those moments, what did you do? You identified that this isn't working. And then you said to yourself, what?
The first thing I did, this was, of course, a big series. Nobody changes overnight. Nobody walks out of a Tony Robbins seminar healed. If there were anyone who could do that for you, you'd pay them a lot of money.
What?
You become very famous, too. Instead, I did it step by step. The first thing I did was I reached for what I previously thought was unthinkable, and that was the self-help book genre. And I began with The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, and deepened into this rabbit hole. Today I have probably 200 books right next to me, and there are hundreds of books all over this house, most in the personal development, self-help, business development model. And it was where I started to be exposed to motivational speaking and to thinking and to seminars and to coaching. And I'd like to say that the rest is history, but first I had to lose everything. Then I had to really find the right teachers. And sure enough, I began the climb. And because it took me so many years, I decided to focus on an archetype that I think was neglected, and that's the superstar. And the superstar archetype is actually being served today, probably by people like Brene Brown, who is focused on leadership, except she's not a practitioner. She's not able to sit with you one-on-one and work only on you. I am. And I created the whole method for people like me who need to learn how to feel, who need to bypass the, just tell me what to do, I'll do it.
Right.
And need to learn how to feel their way to the other side.
That's right. So, and how long from the time you were on the couch in the library to the time in which you realized, okay, I think I can feel my way out of this in a way that feels good every day that I wake up?
4 years.
4 years.
And, yeah, 4 years for me. And I launched Live with Enthusiasm first program exactly 4 years ago. And which was after my own, you know how my philosophy is, you can't heal until you're healed. Right. And I was ready to go. And I think as a result of that, it's been the resounding success of my career and the greatest joy of my life.
Amazing. And impact. I mean, truly. So in terms of thinking through how you would think about now, if there is momentum toward a wanting to be there versus here, and knowing that life is ever expanding and we're ever expanding, and Powerhouse Superstars are just by virtue of who we are, quest seeking, expansion seeking, next level seeking.
Yes.
So what's the formula for doing that, and doing that from a place of satisfaction and joy versus lack and motivation out of lack and scarcity?
I'm really glad you asked that, Tracy, because it gets to the heart of the matter once again. The answer lies exactly at the opposite end of the spectrum from what other people are looking for. Usually they're looking for an external fix. Superstars solve things externally. They go to solution. They try to fix. The way to do this is by doing the exact opposite. Drop the oars immediately. Stop rowing immediately. Take a break. Move backwards. Take a real perspective moment. Take the time to work on yourself. Take the time to do the vulnerability work in coaching. It will feel to you like stagnation, but in those moments, what you will be creating is so enormous that it will catapult you light years ahead once you're done with it. And the best way to explain what's really happening is we're getting you out of what has lit your fire thus far, which is motivation. I gotta do it. I gotta do it because I've got to respond to the threat or the reward. That's what superstars are constantly playing for. They're either trying or they're trying to be very, very rich. One of the other is motivating them. And I'm using very, very banal, very simplistic things that will tie into at least 42% of the population for a reason, not because I'm making a judgment about wealth or about weight. Simply because that is what's happening. Most of us are playing constantly for the results, for the avoidance of pain, or for the maximization of reward. When you take the time to drop those oars and to actually think about who you are and what you want and why you want it, you will start to move again, but this time not from motivation, but from inspiration, from desire within, real desire. Desire that comes without the expectations of others and without any quest for the validation of others, just for you. That's when you start to move as who you really are. And as Carl Jung once said, that is the greatest privilege you'll ever have in this lifetime.
It's so true. And the weirdest part of 2020, truly, Keren, this has been truly, if you're talking about a year where you literally cannot leave the house and you are forced into a place of dropping the oars and not filling your calendar with another trip, another in-person meeting, another XYZ, right? By virtue of this year, all of us have been in this pullback mode and actually hibernation mode. And what I find so fascinating about it in looking at 2020 is that this year has been such a year of change and growth and so much momentum without having the need to fill the calendar to get to the next meeting, to get to the next in-person. I used to fly to Europe just to get to a meeting for the next day and then think, okay, I'm going to fly home. And I will only be effective if I do that. And thinking about what this year has taught us in terms of thinking about what we need to do versus how we can approach growth, and the amount of dropping the oars just by force. We didn't have a choice.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great leveler for many people. It's also been catastrophic for many people, but it's been a great leveler for many people. And I think it's helped us come to term with a couple of things. The first is that force is futile, because with due respect, you don't get to decide what this year holds. I was supposed to get married on March 20th. As we all know, when you make plans, God is the one who has the last laugh. So if anything should teach you humility about the force of the universe versus your own, it's a year like this. But the second thing it's done is absolutely miraculous. It has helped us to remove many of the veneers that we were carrying for the sustaining of our ego. Imposter syndrome, I believe, which is one of the main things I focus on in my practice, as you know, has taken a real hit with 2020. Because a couple of things. First, if you were wondering why you should do something and worried about how to prove yourself enough to do that, well, 2020 is kind of giving you a platform where why the hell not? Life is too short to even think that way anymore. But the second is it's actually allowed us to remove all of these accoutrements and be what we are and really have to live it, because we're all in this together. So you don't get to show people that you don't get to do the flexing anymore. I mean, look at what's happened even in today's short conversation. I had to open the door for the real. Your dog started barking. We're all at home. Everyone is in this together.
100%. So for listeners, what is imposter syndrome? I mean, I think it's important.
Sure, I'll talk about it.
Such an important part of what you do, and such an important part of you have, for me, described and named and identified something that I myself have felt, and I know a lot of my Powerhouse successful friends and people that I've met have felt and feel frequently, and yet I'd not ever really understood what that meant. And so I think it's important to describe what it means.
Well, let's do that. Let's take the time to do that. And just because even superstars like you are still not fully wrapped around imposter syndrome, and more importantly, are not seeing that it's a blind spot that you have to watch out for. Right. I am actually creating a new talk that launches on January 7th called How to Get Out of Imposter Syndrome. And there are a couple of reasons why I am launching this talk personally. Most of them have to do with my heightened feminism in 2020. I think that this is the main obstacle, not only for superstars, but for superstar women. And it's time to let that garbage die with 2020. Imposter syndrome, very, very simply put, is that feeling of not measuring up and having to prove your worth constantly, because otherwise you will be found out and you will be rejected. You see it all the time. People get a job at the White House and it's a very big deal. And the first thing they think is, oh no, I don't belong here. I'm not good enough for this job. Someone's going to throw me out. You launch a podcast to end all podcasts and you know it's magnificent, but you keep worrying that some other person has a better podcast, or that some other person is going to judge you for wanting to have a podcast, because who are you to have a podcast?
Right.
Now, all of these are harshing your buzz, and I want to make it very concrete to understand what this looks like, so that people don't start thinking, oh, not measuring up, I don't have that, because they don't identify exactly that feeling. Here's what it looks like. It looks like Keren's 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Number 1, jealousy. Jealousy. Looking at other people on Instagram and thinking, why them and not me? Or why do they have this and not me? Or I can't believe they have this and not me. Or they're doing all this stuff. I should be doing all of this stuff. All of that is imposter syndrome. Number 2, judgment. Easiest way to spot imposter syndrome is a high horse. Watch out for bravado. Watch out for harshness towards others. Watch out for speaking unkindly. That is almost always behaving like an imposter, like a person who doesn't believe what they see and do so because they don't believe it in themselves. The third is self-justification and apologizing. You know this very well. You're also an Esther Hicks fan. The biggest problem that people have on their road to superstardom is telling it like it is and being very apologetic about where they really are and constantly telling the truth, the honest truth, and nothing but the truth, instead of speaking victory on their life. Not lying, but speaking, well, I'm on the way, I'm doing it, I'm excited, I can.
So true. Huge.
That's a big hallmark of imposter syndrome. And it comes from fear. It comes from fear of making a mistake or being discovered or failing. And I think the big trigger here is shame. So it's one to watch out for.
Huge.
And the last one, the fourth horseman of the apocalypse is that, and you're going to love this, Tracy, because it's you. It's working too hard.
Oh,
working too hard is the ultimate hallmark of imposter syndrome. Because think about it. If you really are a rock star, if you're a freaking Michael Jordan, why aren't you having fun on the court?
Right.
Why aren't you just showing up to have fun? Why do you need all this excess work?
Right. Burning the candle at both ends, 15-hour days, sleeping 5 hours, getting back up, doing it again.
Yeah.
Harder.
That's a big one, and it's a good one. And all of these begin, the antidote begins, and we don't have time to walk people through all the antidotes, but it begins with chill out. Chill out. Find a way to emotionally relax. Find a way to emotionally relax. And from there, you will hear what all of us have to offer you, which are all the solutions you're looking for. And they're emotional solutions. They're changing your thinking, not changing your problem.
100%. And in our work together, the thing that's been really very useful for me that you've taught me is have a couple of habits that help you elevate and level up and bring your emotional experience up.
Yeah.
And what are those go-tos? And so for me, I have a couple of podcasts that I listen to that make such a huge difference. I have a gratitude journal that I write in, and if I can write down 5 things that in the last 24 hours that I've had an opportunity to participate or experience, writing that down and focusing on that for a few minutes, it kind of pulls you emotionally out of that place of the four horses.
All you're talking about is focusing in a different direction. The most powerful thing you can start to do is any of what you, Tracy, just mentioned. But what you're doing really, when you're taking control, you're beginning your day with a very enlightening podcast or meditation, with a gratitude exercise, a real writing and focusing on what you appreciate, is setting an intention. And that intention is, I will enjoy this day. I will be my best self. I will line up with the superstar I know I am. I will not accept not being the superstar I am. Every woman you've interviewed for this magnificent podcast is exactly there. That is how they're there. And they know when they're not there. Right. And it's pretty easy to get back to it. It just takes a lot of practice. It's called the spiritual gym.
So for the imposter syndrome, the identification and the blind spot that you mentioned, what is the way in which you would counsel women, especially as I think a lot of us feel the need to overcompensate, over deliver. I mean, yes, I work my ass off and I do an incredible job, but I'm also raising kids. I'm also homeschool Zooming. I'm also making sure that, the gardener comes in and that the groceries are in the fridge and that dinner's served on time. I mean, there's just this host of things that we're managing, and then hitting the bed at night and putting my head on the pillow, 100% of the time, I'm hearing I could have done a better job. I probably dropped the ball today with my son, who didn't have enough time with me and had this moment. It's like imposter syndrome comes in so many different forms.
Yes.
right?
You're right. So you have a couple of ways out of it. Aside from coaching, so that you get to the root of why you feel this way, which is pretty critical. Every one of us has nuances and different triggers, and you want to identify them so you actually know when and how to modify yourself. Also, we're all kind of different behaviorally, which means we'll take very different tweaking. But the best thing you can do right now to start rising to the best self and staying at the best self, and no one's going to like this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, is get out ahead of it. Your best bet is to get out ahead of it. It's preparation. If you want to set yourself up for a day in which you are truly killing it and not ending the day with this feeling of coulda, shoulda, woulda, start with proper planning. Start with proper planning. Start with the focusing exercises like gratitude journaling, like setting an intention, like podcasting, like meditation. Give to yourself as much light as possible first. Use to-do lists, block out your time like a real champion, know what needs to get done, and do whatever you can to get it done. But there is a second hack that is even more powerful, if anyone out there is willing to try it.
What? We're on the edge of our seat. Tell us.
Start speaking to yourself kindly. Enough with the negative self-talk. Drop it like it's hot, because it is toxic garbage. When I began this practice, I put a picture of myself here. It's here in my office of myself as a baby in the arms of my grandma. Look.
Let me see that little one. Oh,
that's baby Keren.
Oh, you're so delicious.
I was a chunky little bunny rabbit at the age of 18 months. And I started, every time I wanted to tell myself, oh gosh, you dropped the ball. You didn't do it. Yeah, you messed up. You disappointed somebody. Right. I would look at this picture and say, you are stabbing this baby. You cannot do that to a baby. No. And I started to literally talk to myself like this. Nothing needs to happen right now. You're doing your best. It's okay. You got this. You can try again. And I'm telling you, it works like magic. It never compromised my standards. I am not asking any superstar out there to output less than you are. When you are Michael Jordan, you got to go be Michael Jordan. You know that, Tracy. I don't work against you. I'm just asking you to start being a lot easier on yourself, because that is how you become a real champion. That is how you operate from real infinite power, and not power that can be literally blown up by one harsh critic, by one bad mistake. You have come too far to beat yourself up for something silly and nonsensical. You've got a bigger thing going on here.
I love that recommendation, because everyone can do that. Everyone can find a picture of themselves as a small child, put it into a frame right next to your workspace or right next to your bed as you go to bed at night, and keep that memory of that sweet little face in front of you when you start speaking harshly to yourself.
You would never let anyone speak that way to a baby.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So be the baby.
Oh, I love that. And it's actually, it really does. I have a couple of those around pictures. And it's interesting. You're exactly right. I'm even so cautious about how I speak to my own children, right? When they're doing something, and how would I have wanted that experience to be as a kid? How would I have wanted to hear that correction of them? And so the way we talk to ourselves is so much harsher than what we would ever say to someone else.
Well, there's another reason for having the picture out and doing the self-soothing with the baby in mind. And this is how I teach teenagers. Most of the suicidal callers on Crisis Text Line are under the age of 25. We classify that as children. Mm-hmm. And the reason you teach them self-soothing, the way you teach them self-soothing, is by asking them, how would you speak to a friend of yours who was going through this? What would you say to a friend who was going through the same thing? Mm. And you are so powerful, and you're so wonderful, and you're so brave to be here. What would you say to a friend from this place that is so communicative and so brave? You remind people of how much power they have, of how much courage they have, so that they're not disconnected from their superstardom. And you externalize the self-soothing, because most of us will do much more for somebody else than we will for ourselves. Much more. And when you start to realize that the person you're soothing in that picture I mean, don't look like me, but that's me. You start to really come full circle with yourself. And this is a mindfulness practice that is infinitely possible. So the first thing is know your leverage, stop behaving like an imposter, get out ahead of it. You didn't start working yesterday. Really, really plan for good days. Plan for good days. And that's not going to make all your days good, but it's going to make most of them good. And the second is on the other end of it, when you didn't hit those marks, when you did mess up, learn to self-soothe and speak to yourself as kindly as you would to a baby.
So in wrapping this up and thinking about 2021, going into January, listeners will be hearing this. What would you be recommending to listeners, and especially to Powerhouse women who are thinking about their year? How would you be thinking or coaching or guiding them to be their best self in 21? What would be one thing that you'd say, here's a takeaway that could be really impactful and make
I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
The first is to realize in 2020 how mortal we are, how finite the time is. And to encourage anyone out there to tap into that understanding, to be extraordinarily kind to themselves and everyone around them, and to really go for it. You can be and do and have anything you want. There is no reason not to.
Right.
Because we're all going to run out of time.
Right.
And the second is be easy on yourself. There is nothing serious going on around here. Again, from the exact same premise. It's finite for all of us. We will all die. So why are you making such a big deal of things? Just go for what you really, really want.
I love that. It's so important. And I agree. I mean, wow, think about it. We all burn the candle at both ends and say, when I get here or when I do this, then I'm going to find happiness. Then I'm going to be joyful. Then I'm going to have time off. Then I'm going to have more time with my kids, right?
Why don't you solve for the more time and the more joyful instead of for the thing that you think is going to make you more time and more joyful? Because it never will.
100%. And you're right. If anything, 2020 has taught us morality or mortality.
Yeah.
Right? And
today, my mother got a vaccine. You know, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer last year, 1.5 years ago. And she was housebound all year because she made a miraculous recovery from stage 4 melanoma that advanced to almost all her vital organs, free and clear. But she now couldn't leave the house because of COVID. And to have this moment is to really recognize that she is getting a second chance at life. She's getting second chance at freedom. All of us should see this as a metaphor for our life. Every day we can begin again. Every day, even if you've had nothing and nowhere and all the odds stacked against you and a really tough year, begin right now. Walk out of your door right now and decide that I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm going to do this.
oh man, that is such good advice. I get chills. I love it.
It's always fun to speak to you.
And I think it's such a gift to have your voice and your perspective and your guidance and leadership in helping us all really just settle into the best of who we are, and then to make the most of who we want to be, and dropping the oars to be in the moment of allowing rather than forcing and pushing. It's like, this aha, right?
Yeah.
And just thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about this. And I can't wait to have you back, because I do think that this conversation is going to spur a lot of inquiry and a lot of questions and a lot of deeper dive into some of these things.
Yeah.
Because even though as human beings we hear it, it sometimes takes us exactly in this moment experiencing it and then coming back for more and saying, now what?
That's true, but that's what's so wonderful is also the beginning of the recognition of the progress. Albert Einstein once said, a mind that has expanded through an idea can never return to its original size. Mm-hmm. And when you start to understand that you're always expanding, there's always expansion, there's always expansion. Really, your only job is not to ask, where am I going next? It's just, how do I milk this? That's it. This is delicious. This is all there is. This is what you came for. You didn't come here for the creations. You came here for the creating.
Yeah.
You came here for the fun. You came here for the running up and down the court, not for the touchdown.
Yeah. How do I milk it?
Just milk it. That's it. Ask yourself, what do I really want to ring my bells today? That's where you are, Tracy. If I were you, I would just say, where do I would want to point my wand today? Bibbidi bobbidi boo.
It's so nice to always talk to you. I love
Always
it.
such
Thank
a pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. I hope everybody out there enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
I did too. Thanks so much. See you soon. Happy New Year.
Bye, Tracy. Happy New Year.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to From Potential to Powerhouse, Success Secrets from Female Leaders with your host, Tracy Holland.